Hi there, Phil from PDX.Gold here, talking about the rebuild of this BRP-1 pump that we use in our Star 150 and other products that we make. This was one of the ones that we had taken apart. We're going to walk through the reassembly process at this point, step by step. Before we got started with that though, I wanted to talk a little bit about the cleaning process. We use an ethyl alcohol solution to clean this. Dissolves all of the crud, organic matter that's gotten inside. We've gone through and cleaned all the O-rings. These specialty O-rings right here that you can see, these are unique and hard to find, so be very careful when you're cleaning this and taking those apart because they're expensive to replace. All of the ring expanders, the rings, the sleeves, the pistons, the cylinders, plates, valves, so on and so forth. One of the things that you should be aware of is that when you're cleaning these pumps with alcohol, sometimes it'll attack the paint. What happens is when these are built at the factory, they're all assembled, and then all of these different sealants and whatnot are oozing out around the side. They run it through a paint line that puts another coat of paint on it. And so what happens is, when you clean this, it may start to discolor. And in some cases, even it'll blow off when you use an air gun to clean that off. That's fine. That's not going to be anything that's going to damage your pump. What you want to make sure it's doing is it's not taking off this powder-coated coating so that you still have a good, smooth sealing member to put that on. All of the joints that are sealed on here are that powder-coated, shiny surface, so you should be okay. One of the things that we want to make sure that we have is the right sealants and greases. For all of the O-rings, we're going to use this MolyKote 111, which is a food-safe grease. You'll want to make sure that you have a tube of this. We also use this Loctite 567 thread sealant. And we also use this Loctite 510, which is a Flange gasket sealant. Okay? There's a number of tools and Allen wrenches and whatnot that we're going to use. Those are all listed below in the list of tools, as well as all of these greases and sealants. So, first step is to put on the crank assembly with the two pistons and the counterweight. So basically, if you recall when we took this apart, this is a really tight fit in here. I mean, super tight fit. And so, in order to get it off, we had to spread it apart a little bit. We used some screwdrivers to put in there. And that's what we're going to use this time. We could maybe try and get lucky and slide it on there, but I don't think that that's going to happen. And so rather than waste time, I'm just going to grab a little short stubby screwdriver, and I'm going to sit that in here like that. And I'm going to try and spread this out just a little bit. There you go. So the thing about this is these particular ones you recall had a bunch of goo and stuff on here. We've very carefully cleaned these with the ethanol, the ethyl alcohol solution, and made sure that all of the bearings were still good, the seals were still tight. So what we'll do now is what we want to do is when we slide this on, we want to try to hold this perpendicular and turn this as we go so that we get a good, easy entry on here. Now if I'm fortunate, this will slide right on. Look there, it needs to go a little bit further. Let's use this just to tap it on just a little bit. You don't want to hit it too hard. You should be able to see down in here whether or not it's seated on here. And that looks pretty good, I think, here. Okay, so I had to cut away there because I unfortunately forgot to bring a flashlight over here to look. What you can do is you can peer down in this split here and verify that the shaft is bottomed out on the counterweight, and that's what you need to do. Worst case, while you have a wedge in here to pry it apart, you can tap it lightly with a rubber mallet. Make sure that you only tap it on the end of the crank and on the eccentric. Do not hammer on the piston rods. Okay, that is a potential area of damage, and if you do that, all bets are off. Okay, so we got that on there. Let's set this off to the side. What we want to do is we want to use our 3/16 screw, and we're going to put a tiny dot of Loctite on here to make sure that that isn't going to come off. Doesn't need a lot, super tiny little bit, but you want to make sure you got something on there that's going to keep that in place when it's assembled. And here. Now we're going to tighten this down, just sort of finger tight, and then we're going to torque it on there. You want to get it to 100 to 130 inch-pounds, which is about 8 to 11 foot-pounds. Okay? All right, so that's down there. Let's see what we got here. Verify what this is set at. All right, this is set to 10. There you go. That's done. So the next thing is we need to put on this housing and this O-ring. So the challenge with this is that the O-ring, when you're putting this on, wants to fall off. Okay? What you need to do here is use this MolyKote, which is, here I have an open one over here, which is really kind of thick and gooey, acts as a nice kind of a sort of temporary adhesive to hold that in there while you're doing it. Additionally, what you want to do is take and put some of this Loctite sealant, flange sealant on there. You're going to go all the way around. Here, let me get this up here so I can show you. You're going to go all the way around the outside of this, outside of the O-ring, and you're going to do a small circle around each one of these 4 bolt holes. Connect that to that, all right? One of the things you want to make sure that you're doing is that when you're cleaning this up, you clean out this O-ring gland really well, and then get that going. So this has a little bit of residue on here, but we've gone through and done a really pretty good job of cleaning that off. You don't want to get down there and scrape it up too much so that you're marring the paint. That's a nice shiny sealing surface. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pause while I put this together. I'll show you how gooey this stuff is, and then I'll turn this off and get this on and show you how to where this needs to be applied before we put it on. Okay? Okay, so what I've done here is I've put the sorry about that. Put this MolyKote onto the gasket here. It's nice and gooey. It's a really thick kind of grease. Apply that liberally. Not too extensively, but we want to make sure that it's applied all the way around on all the surfaces of the O-ring. And then for this Loctite 510, I'll try and hold this at different angles so that you can see. But what I've done is I've gone around each of the bolt holes and then had a bead that connects those from point to point to point. Okay? Now we want to take and install this. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that the counterweight is down like this, right? And we're going to want to hold these up. Now this can be pretty tricky and pretty frustrating. You may want to have another person handy to do that. I'm going to try and do it by myself. I've done it by myself on occasion, although I was not able to do it on the first try. So we'll see how this goes. So take and put this O-ring in here. Tap it down in there so that it sort of sets itself into this gland. Okay. And let's see what we can come up with here. Get this out of the way. Alrighty. So what we want to do here is kind of hold this like this. Hopefully the O-ring doesn't fall out. We're going to sort of sit this in here like this. Try not to get any of this sealing compound onto these other components. we go. Okay. And then we're gonna put this on here. Hold that up. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a couple of these in to hold it, and then come back and tighten these down. So what you want to do is make sure that this is on here flat, wiggle it around just a little bit. Make sure that you can look in here and see that the O-ring hasn't fallen out. It appears to be good. Okay, so I'm just going to put those two on there right now to hold it, and I'm going to put some red dot on here for these other two, and then I'll take those first ones out and put a little red dot on there. You could have done that to start with beforehand and got that all on all four of them. Move this around here so I got a good spot to put that on. And then what we're going to wind up doing is once we get the red dot on all of these and get them snugged down and make sure that it's still looking pretty good on the installation, we're going to torque these down. And one of the things I should point out while I'm doing this is you'll note that I don't have any of the sleeves or O-rings, sealing grooves on here. The piston is pretty much naked up here. That's because you don't want to get any of these other greases or compounds onto the pistons. It's much easier to clean when you only have to clean the piston if you accidentally touch it while you're putting this on. All right, and then when we tighten this down, we're going to do this in a star pattern. So we'll go across and then across and do that. And basically I'm doing this, and there are no new parts on here. I should have said that at the beginning, but I didn't. These are all existing parts and components that came out of this pump when it came in. This is the one that had quite a bit of goo stuck on it to clean out. And so basically all of these parts cleaned up really nice, and we were very careful when taking them apart, so we didn't need to replace anything. All right, I'm going to pause for a minute while I go get an extension for the torque wrench, and then I'll be right back and we'll torque that up. Okay, we'll tighten that up a little bit. And rather than just tighten it right straight down to the target, we're going to sort of walk this around in the star pattern and tighten these all up evenly. All right, we're good. Oops. Well, that can happen. Fortunately, it's not difficult to get that out. I would not recommend rebuilding your pump with tools in the crankcase. Alrighty, so let me put this back on the Lazy Susan here. And so now you can see what you've got is you've got the sealant, the flange sealant that's oozing out the sides here. It's nice and tight up against the bearing housing. Everything's good to go. All right, so we're on now to putting on a cylinder and a cylinder head. So one of the things you want to do here is you want to make sure that when these are put on, that these gaskets or these slits are 180 degrees off. So it doesn't matter which way you go on here, right? They're the same thing. So what I want to do is I want to be fairly gentle when I put these on. I want to get this down over here. All right, and just as an example, I'm going to put this one here, this slot that faces forward, and then this other one that I put on, I want to have this face backwards. Okay, and then I want to do the same thing with these piston rings, right? So I don't want them to be like this, I want them to be like this. All right, can you see that? How the outside on one goes that way, and the outside on this one goes the other way. And then I want these to be offset 180 degrees also. But before I put those on, what I want to do is I want to put on these ring expanders. Let's put this on. These are fairly lightweight, but what they do is they spread this apart so you get a good seal against the cylinder wall. Okay, so we'll do that one first. And once you get them on, you can move them around so it's not hugely difficult. What you want to make sure you do though is that you've got that ring expander in there, and this one's facing the back, so I'll make this bottom one face forward. I'll do this one here. And I've got the bottom one coming up, so I'll put the bottom one going down like that. There we go. Okay. Let's turn this around just a little bit. Okay. Okay. That in there? Yeah, so what you should see is these compress all the way down. All the way down. So they'll move around while you're putting it on, that's okay. What you want to do then is when you get ready to actually install it, you've got it in the right orientation. Okay, so do these one at a time. Again, one face is forward, one face is back, one face is forward and up, one face is back and down. Okay. What that does is that gives the any gases and whatnot that get by there, it gives it a more circuitous route to go through there. This pump runs fast enough that any pressure that this sees is momentary, and so what happens is it makes it much more difficult for the gas to go by the rings and the seals. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these cylinder assemblies before we get going. So I talked a little bit about this. There's an O-ring on the bottom and an O-ring on the top, and there's a valve plate. It's up here, and another O-ring that goes in here, and a valve. The head, it also has one of those rings in it, and the cylinder head itself. So one of the things about this is that this does not have an orientation. This does not have an orientation. We try and put it so that the seam here like this goes along this line. Just a matter of aesthetics, and we know that we're doing it the same way every time. But what happens is you'll see on the valve plate here, it's got a little bump. And the orientation of that bump is really very important. This goes to the low pressure side, which is, in this instance, is the forward part of the pump. And you need to make sure that both cylinders are done the same way. Otherwise, you're going to be pumping out of one cylinder and into the other one, and it's not going to do anything. You're going to say, this doesn't work. And it's because you put it together wrong. So again, we're going to use the this MolyKote on all the O-rings. And we're going to put some flange seal on all these things. So let's pause for a moment while I go ahead and put that on. All right, so we're here day 2. I'm going to finish this up. What we've got here now is we've got on the crankcase, we've got on the piston and cylinder and counterweight, the crankcase, and now we're going to install the cylinders. I think I talked last time about the the sleeves and the rings here, make sure that when they're on there, they're aligned 180 degrees off. This one is on this side. This one is on this side. The same thing with the rings. It doesn't matter which way you do it. They can go up and down or sideways. Doesn't matter. Turn these 90 degrees to these, it's fine. But what you're looking for is, again, 180 degrees off. What's going to happen is that when we put the cylinder on, they're going to start to move with the cylinder anyway, so it doesn't really matter. All right, I've got the O-rings all greased up here with the MolyKote 111 ready to go. That's the food safe grease that we use. We're going to install four O-rings here today. There's a larger one on the bottom, a smaller one on the top, and then we've got those split O-rings that go right here. All right, so one of the things we want to do here is I took a break to put this out so that we could talk about this without talking about these ones that have the sealant on them. The heads on these compressors have little clocking notches. You can see that right there. I'll hold it up against my white coat. You can see the notch there on the actual cylinder head. There's a notch here on the valve plate, and then there's also one here on the, this is actually the valve, and then this is one on the valve plate. So we're going to put these on, and each layer that we put on here requires this Loctite 510 flange sealant. And so what we want to do is we want to put it around each bolt hole, and we want to put it around the hole of the head here. So you can see that. I'll hold that up there. You want to make sure not to get any of this inside here. You want to make sure that none gets on the cylinder, none gets on the piston, and none gets into the valves, because the stuff will harden and be sticky. So what I've done here is, because this is really tight real estate around here, where you put the O-ring on this cylinder, I've put it onto the crankcase, but I've not put any on the very bottom there. So I'll have to stop and put a little bit on there. But if we're careful, we should be able to slide this on and then arc it up, rotate it up a little bit, finish up that application, and then push this down onto there, and ensuring that we've got the flange sealant on all of the surfaces and not getting any on the piston or the cylinder or the valves and whatnot. So let's go. Let's get this started. The flange here on this cylinder has a slight lead to it. So the diameter at the bottom is slightly larger than it is in the working area of the piston of the cylinder. And so it's a little bit easier to get that on there, and you can get it on there and we'll wiggle that on. But the first thing to do is to take the O-ring that we've pre-MolyKoted and sit that into the O-ring groove. And the MolyKote will hold it into the position where it needs to be, so we can install it without it falling out or flopping around. Okay? Same thing there applies to the MolyKote that does to the flange sealant. Try not to get that on the working surfaces of the pump, the piston, the cylinder, so on and so forth. So now sometimes this can be a little bit tricky. What we found is that if you just compress this by hand and then we'll sort of wiggle this on as you go, it usually goes on pretty straightforward. We'll see how this works under the pressure of being on camera. So bear with me here. There's one. There's two. I didn't get any on there. There's three. All right. So we're going to push that down so that it's on there. And then I'm going to take I'll rotate this around so you can see. But I'm holding that up so that it doesn't touch. I'm going to put a little bit more here to finish that where I missed it. And then we're going to run this line right across here. Okay, all right. So now that we've got that on there, what we want to do is work this down on here and install this, and trying not to smear this around too badly. Get that on. Okay. So we should be good there. Now the next thing that goes on is the valve plate, which goes on next. But first we're going to put on the top O-ring, which is this one. All right, let me turn it around here. And again, you want to make sure that you've got it generously coated, not grossly overcoated, but you want to have it, make sure it's got a nice coating on there so that it'll stay and stick in place. Try and keep your gloves clean. And then the way this goes on here is we'll have to stop and after we get this going, actually I need to do this now on the top because I already have it on the other side of the valve plate. You can see here. I'll need to do that on the flip side once I get ready to put the valve on. Ready? And as we said, you can have this cylinder on oriented in any way, shape, or form. It's round, so every 90 degrees you can be fine. We just try and line it up so these lines are facing the front and the back. So let's go with this. You don't need a lot because it's going to squish. But you need enough so that when it does squish, it covers the flange and assists with the sealant aspect of the O-ring and the rest of the assembly. Okay, so let's set that down. All right, so that's what that looks like there now. Now, the assembly goes together pretty quickly here. So once I get started, I'm just going to try and get this together. I'll thread in a bolt to hold it so that it's aligned and doesn't start sliding around and oozing this stuff around in different places. But we'll see where that goes. Okay, so this goes on next. All right, again, you got to be careful not to touch the flange, sealant, and ooze it around. The flat surface of this valve plate goes down. And then, I guess before I do that, getting ahead of myself, I need to put on this O-ring here. So again, pre-covered with the MolyKote 111. We're going to tap this into place so that it stays in place. And actually, because it's easier, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just assemble this right on here and then put it on as an assembly. So I've got this like this, and again, try and move this around. Notch, notch, line those up. Put that down there. There we go. And then same thing with the top here. We're going to put in that O-ring. It's glued itself down to the plate. Okay. Okay, so we've got that as well. There you go. So notch on the front of this assembly. Gotta put this together like that. And I'm gonna slide a couple bolts in here. so that they don't spin around and mess with my alignment. Okay, so I've got this assembly now. We can put this on. We'll do this. Now if they separate, that should be fine because the bolts are holding them on and holding them aligned. So let's go. And so this goes towards the front. Can you see that notch? We're going to go like that. That one in there. And then we'll go this one up here. Did you see how that came apart? That's fine. So we just don't want them to slide around. So let's get that started. Okay, that one's okay. So now, basically, that is assembled at this point, and now it's just a function of putting the Loctite goo here on, thread sealant, and torquing everything down. So let me clean this up here for just a bit. Set that aside. Get this out of the way. We're done with this for the time being. And what I'm going to do here is, with the other ones here, I'm going to, because this thread sealant is kind of gooey, I'm going to get them through here first, and then I'm going to apply the thread sealant just before I put them in here and thread them in. Okay? So this is a white gooey stuff. So we're going to take this one here. I'm going to put some of this on. All right. Can you see that? Got a fair amount liberally applied there. I'm going to push that in. Get that started. Okay. I'll do this other one that's just sort of slip fit through here. Okay. Get that one down in there. Get that one started. Okay. That's going to hold those in place. Let's take these other ones out that we put in initially and put the Loctite thread sealant on there. So the thing about this here is that if you find that you've gooped it up and you've got some of that thread sealant on the cylinder wall, the piston, or the valve plate, where it will be exposed to your solvent and whatnot, stop, take it apart, clean it up. One of the things that's very critical with this pump is its internal cleanliness, which is why, again, not to toot our own horn, but we try and encourage people to use a CycloneDry to prevent, in addition to your molecular sieve, but you want to use that to prevent organic material from getting into the pump. And I've said this before, and we've posted it on our Instagram thing, but all of these piston pumps, whether they're this one or any of our competitors, a Corken or a CMAP or a Haskell or God knows what, because they're all tight tolerance pumps in the piston area and the cylinders, once you get some organic material in them that starts to gum up the works, it really starts to mess with the pump and its efficiency and its ability to work smoothly and effectively. We'll just tighten these down here a little bit, and then we're going to torque them down. And you want to, just like with putting on a wheel on your car or something like that, you want to do this in a star pattern. So we're going to go cross, cross. What's going to happen here is that once we start to do this, you'll start to see this stuff ooze out on the flanges. We don't want to just tighten it down until it snaps, till we get that limit all at once. We'll try and pull it down evenly. And then we'll start to go through and torque it down to its final end value. Okay, that moved just a tiny bit. As did that one. That one did not. That one did a tiny bit. Okay, so in essence, this one's done here now. We can see that this moves. And you can hear actually the valve moving in here and sucking air in and moving it out. So this one's essentially done at this point. Now, it's basically duplicating that assembly on this other side. I'll pause the video here while I go ahead and pre-apply this Loctite 510 so that you don't have to watch me do that. And then we'll go ahead and put on the other one. Okay, so I've got the rest of this prepped. I've got the O-rings installed into the cylinder heads, O-rings installed into the valve plate. I've got the sealant applied to the cylinder head and to the valve plate, as well as to the crankcase. Again, skipping this part right here in the middle, because you do not want to get any of this sealant, any of the sealant or the goo on the grease onto this sleeves or the rings. They are impregnated with lubricants and don't need any additional lubrication. So additionally, I've also got the O-ring in here. The only one that I have left to do is the one on the top, where I'll have to put on this rest of this on this surface before I start to apply these. So again, the same comment applies that we had before. Make sure that these are diametrically opposed and get these on here. And again, sometimes it goes on, bang, lickety split, and sometimes you got to work it. So let's see what we can come up with here for this side. So what we're going to want to do here is it's on there and it spins around okay, so we should be good. Yep, everything moves cleanly. Let's get this up here out of the way so we can put this again. So you can see here what I've done is I've put this flange sealant all the way around except for on this bottom portion here that we're going to do just now after we've got all of the cylinder and piston components out of the way so that they won't become contaminated. So I'm just going to set that there actually. That doesn't touch. And I'm going to start and assemble this so we can do this sort of lickety split here. Again, as I mentioned, I've got the O-rings installed. I've got the key towards the front facing you. The flat part of this valve plate goes down. All right. Keep your hands clean and it'll make your life easy putting that on. Actually, before we do that, let's get this on here. And then I can put that part on. Get this assembly, sub-assembly ready to go. There we go. Put this out of the way. All right. Valve plate. Valve. Right there. Cylinder head. Again, the key faces forward along with the other parts. And we'll line these up before we put them in so that they don't slide around too terribly bad. All right, so I'm going to turn this away from you for a moment. Actually, I think what we'll do is we'll just take and we'll slide this down on here. Let's make sure that we've got the facing forward. Actually, see, I said that earlier. We pull this back apart. I'm going to turn this 90 degrees so that we're consistent. I really didn't need to do that, but because I said that's how we do it, I went ahead and did it anyways. Okay. So I got that there. Let's slide these on. This faces forward. Okay. So we've got that going. Let's get this out of the way. And we're going to slide these in here just loosely so that we can apply this thread sealant, thread locker. And again, all of these different sealants and chemicals and greases are listed in the verbiage down below, along with a tooling list that you might need to do this and accomplish this. Okay. There's that one. So I'm going to tighten this down. I'm not going to tighten it. I'm going to tighten it down. I'm going to tighten it up a little bit. I'm not going to tighten it all the way down because this floats a little bit, and I want to make sure that the as these other bolts go in here, they have the opportunity to help self-center the cylinder on the flange on the crankcase. So we just get it down a little bit so it's not rattling around. So we'll snug these down a little bit until we get some resistance and we see nice squish on the head and the valve plate and stuff. Okay, so that looks good. This one here. So now, one of the things that you should see here is, like I said, maybe before I tighten these down, I'll show you. There's a fair amount of this stuff that's oozed out along in here. That's supposed to do that. In the factory, when they build them, they take and they wipe that stuff off. And we can do that. I might do that, might not. I think I'm just going to leave it so that you can see that what it looks like when it's not wiped off. But what they do is they wipe this stuff all off, and then they squirt it with that other second coat of paint, which when you're washing this off, really turns flat and in many cases will peel off. I showed you that initially. So it's totally your call whether or not you want to do that. Take and put actually, that's the last one here. Let's go over here. A second coat of paint on yours. I don't know whether the appearance at this point is primary in your mind. I would be more concerned about performance, but totally up to you. Go through this one more time. Okay, and with that, we're done. Should turn. You'll have a little bit of resistance. You can hear the valves as they're flopping away there. Now put your fingers over here. Oh yeah. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry, let this cure. I don't know what the curing times are on these. You can read them off the back of this. We'll probably let this set for at least 24, 48 hours. And then what we'll do is we'll dress it. We'll put our fittings on there along with a sheave, and we'll run it out to the test stand. And we'll show you what we do to test them. All righty? Thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, let us know.